Next I'd like to introduce Jane Permutter from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, and she'll be talking about some of her work there as well as some of her personal experience. So welcome.
Thank you. So I'm really going to talk on behalf of PCORI, but I don't work for them. I am a 33-year, 4-time cancer survivor, but an interloper here. I'm not a cholangiocarcinoma patient. Bile duct is what I've been taught that I could say, but I'm trying to learn. At any rate, it's really my pleasure to be here. I was here yesterday with some of the research advocates who are terrific, but I'm even more overwhelmed by some of the great people here and how much everyone knows. When you've been involved in this for 30-some-odd years, you learn a lot, but a lot of you have been in it less, but I'm looking forward to your taking over 30 years hence. Right, Melinda? At any rate, I also want to thank the last speaker. I don't know what you folks think about the FDA either before or after, but over my years, I've come to really believe that cancer patients have a real friend at FDA, and we're very, very lucky. But I'm here to represent PCORI, and I'm doing that in part because I've been involved in PCORI, and because I was going to be here anyway. And let's see if I can do this right. That one, I bet. Because PCORI has actually provided support for this program, and particularly for a number of the patients who are here today, patients and caregivers. So how many of you have ever heard of PCORI? Okay, fewer than have heard of FDA, but still some. PCORI is patient-centered outcomes research. It's a very special organization, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. This foundation is a very, very, very special advocacy organization. PCORI works with a lot of advocacy organizations. I personally have worked with a lot of cancer advocacy organizations, but I've been bowled over. You have really an amazing, inspirational leader. Your programs, and especially for a pretty rare cancer, but even for a very common cancer, this is just really very, very special, and you're lucky to have them, and I am lucky to have had my paths cross with them. But PCORI has actually recognized how special you are, because they support a lot of advocacy organizations, and you'll see why. It's part of their mission. But this organization is the only organization that has been supported 3 years in a row to bring people to these kinds of meetings. And that's because they know that you are doing really special things, and it's part of their mission to get patients and caregivers and other stakeholders interacting a lot with researchers and clinicians, and for us to really all be working together. And a day like today, and then following it with the next few days, is evidence of that. And it's really quite lovely. So that's why PCORI has continued to fund you, and that's why I was invited to give this talk. Just to say a little bit more about PCORI, for those of you that don't know or don't know, some people think it's actually a government organization. It doesn't, it's not. It doesn't have a .gov like FDA does at the end of their URL. It's .org. However, it was mandated by government, and initially some money was provided, but not so much. It was actually part of the Affordable Care Act. It was mandated as part of that, and it's funded by health insurance dollars. So every patient that has health insurance, a couple of dollars, I think it's actually $4, but I'm not positive, I should know, of the money for their health insurance goes to fund PCORI, because PCORI is really about helping to understand what really works and what is maybe hype or historical usage. And in cholangiocarcinoma, we're mostly looking for new treatments because we have so little. But nevertheless, there are a bunch of things that have we don't necessarily know what's better than what, particularly in, let's say, the surgical realm, where there are not so many clinical trials. We sort of learn by doing, and some people do it differently and keep adopting the procedure, and that's good. But as we have more and more options, we really want to be able to compare them. So PCORI was devised to actually do what's called comparative effectiveness research, to take things that are in standard care, healthcare, and really understand what is the best and provide the evidence base for that. And a lot of what certainly what FDA is about, what drug companies are about, are finding new drugs and getting new drugs approved. But as patients, while that's important, we really want to know what is the best treatment. And sometimes, even when we know that a drug works, we don't really know what the best schedule or dose is. We know what sort of works, but we don't know if it might work better if we used a slightly different scheduling of it. We don't know when we should stop giving the drug. There's a lot of still other questions that remain. And PCORI funds a lot of that type of research. And it is important to patients, optimizing the treatment, not only getting new drugs. Maybe not for people with no other options, but down the road we want that. So that's what PCORI is all about. And it's needed because although there are lots of new advances in healthcare, there's still a lot of questions that are not yet well known. And a lot of the work that is being done as I said, to get new drugs approved, but not necessarily really understanding what's most important to the patients and what will be most convenient and be accepted by clinicians. Now, I think that's changing, and as Naomi talked about, patient-centered drug development, and as the advocates heard from some of the pharmaceutical companies, they are increasingly trying to do that. But PCORI, which was formed less than 10 years ago, is actually, I think, has been a catalyst to that kinds of thinking and to these types of coming together of patients and advocates. So how do they work differently? Well, they focus on answering questions important to patients, and as you'll see, they do that by engaging patients much more than has been done in the past. And they really are particularly interested in what will work in the real-world setting. So as some of you know, to be in a clinical trial, you often have to meet very stringent eligibility requirements. You can't have this comorbidity, and you can't be too old or too young, and sometimes some other things that may or may not be really relevant. And there are some historical reasons for limiting enrollment in clinical trials to maybe the healthiest patients. But when those drugs are approved, they're typically used in what we call the real world and given to patients that might not meet those eligibility requirements. And people like PCORI and like FDA now and ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, and NCI are saying, wait a second, do we really need those eligibility requirements? We really want to know what's going to work for the patients who it's going to be used on. So as patients and advocates, we can demand or ask for at least or encourage the carrot's better than the stick and the smile is better than the growl. But at any rate, we want to, I believe, expand the eligibility requirements. So those are some of the types of things. To be a little bit more formal about it, the formal mission, I'm not going to read all these slides in part because I'm dyslexic, but because you could read them and I like to put my spin on it. But their goal is to really help real people make healthcare decisions and to improve healthcare. That's the formal mission. This is actually written from what the legislation said when it formed it. And this slide actually shows you the diversity of what PCORI views as its stakeholders. And as you could see, it involves virtually everybody. Payers, that means like health insurers, clinicians, caregivers and family members, the people here, patients, hospitals, training institutions, industry, and advocacy organizations. And it spends a lot of time, energy, and money making sure that all these people are at the table. And one of my pet peeves about a lot of places where patients and advocates are asked to get involved is they often follow what I call the ladies' auxiliary model. You know, you have the patients here, you ask them a question, and then you have the clinicians here, you ask them a question, and you keep them apart. And I think what we're doing here at this meeting is the right way to do it, and so does PCORI. We put them together. We help people learn to speak to each other by having meetings like this, where it's a little bit friendlier to begin with. It's mostly patients and caregivers. But tomorrow, we're going to have you all together with the researchers, and we have some researchers here. We let some in. And we begin to understand that there's a lot of different trade-offs, and we don't understand everything, and that's okay. We have our own perspective, but we share them, and to some extent understand why things are going the way they are. So that's part of, you know, this get everybody involved and talking to each other, not just isolated silos. Why to engage? You know, make sure that we have relevancy, legitimacy, and that we have uptake. And I want you guys to be razor-focused on the mission of the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation, because it's special, important, and you guys are the only ones that can do it. But some of you who, like myself, have, you know, a shorter attention span and have been around so long that you want to spread out your wings a little bit, might want to learn a little bit more about some other organizations. So I encourage you to consider PCORI as a great place to put some of your advocacy energy and to learn about some other things. Here are some of the types of things that you can do. But on the other hand, listen to Jordan this afternoon and Melinda and find out how to help CCF. I wasn't paid to say that, but I actually have come to believe that. I personally am on the, I'm chair of the Patient Engagement Advisory Panel, and that's been a great experience. It's why I'm here. This sort of is a visual way to present some of the material on the last slide. One very valuable tool that we've put together, the Patient Engagement Advisory Panel, which we call the PEEP, is this rubric, which you can get on the website, and it'll help both researchers and advocacy groups learn how to better work with each other in all the different ways. So I just wanted to call that one out for you to see and put on you know, their webpage will, if you are interested or know someone else who wants to get involved, where you can find out more. There's a lot of stuff embedded in that website, as is there in yours. So do explore them and see what kinds of tools might help you out. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, take any questions. I'll be around today, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about PCORI, about cancer advocacy, about anything you want to talk about. If you're willing to listen to someone with a Bronx accent who has not lived there for a long time. And I can take a couple of questions now if anyone has any. Thank you.
While Jane's coming down, I just want to say just a couple things about Jane. Jane is a very experienced research advocate. She has a PhD, and she knows the science, and she has worked with many. She has nurtured many in research advocacy. She met Melinda and took a particular interest in Melinda and has taken Melinda under her wing so that we could really start an amazing research advocacy program. We have about a dozen research advocates who have been working through this program all year, and Jane flew in and spent the day with us yesterday just taking us through so that we can understand better how to help you. So Jane's special to us, and she has done a wonderful job, and we really appreciate her helping us to get up to speed and to do what we need to do so that we can play a bigger role.
Thank you.